Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. All right, so we're diving into something pretty big today.
Yeah, no kidding.
Trump's back in the White House.
Second term.
And one of the first things he's making noise about is education reform.
Big time.
We've got a whole stack of stuff to dig into.
Oh, yeah.
This Epoch Times article that lays out his whole platform, some expert opinion.
From all sides, I bet.
Absolutely. And we even found some chatter from parents online.
Always interesting.
The goal here is to figure out what's actually going on and what it all might mean.
For everyday people.
Exactly. For parents, students, anyone who cares about education.
What I'm finding fascinating is Trump isn't just talking about tweaking a few things here and there.
Right.
He's talking about like a fundamental shift in power.
Whoa.
Yeah, like potentially dismantling the Department of Education.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Dismantling the whole thing?
That's what he's saying.
That's not just like a policy change. That's like a bomb on the whole system.
It would be massive.
Right.
And it really gets to this deep ideological divide.
Okay.
You've got people like Jonathan Butcher.
Yeah, I know it.
From the Heritage Foundation.
Yeah.
He's been saying for years that the DOE has become this bloated, ineffective bureaucracy. He even argues that some of its original goals,
like what?
Promoting vocational education, have been completely lost.
So just get rid of it and shift all that power to the states and local districts.
That's the idea.
But wouldn't that just create like a patchwork of different systems across the country?
That's exactly the concern from groups like the American Council on Education.
Right.
They say the DOE is vital for...
What, like setting some kind of national standard?
Yeah, setting national priorities, ensuring at least some level of equity. They also point out that actually getting rid of the department,
I bet that's...
it's a monumental task.
Yeah.
Even with a Republican majority in Congress,
right.
Think about it, it's never been done before.
No, never. So maybe dismantling is too strong a word.
Maybe.
But streamlining, budget cuts,
definitely
shifting power.
All still very much on the table.
Okay, so what does that mean for like someone with kids in public school or someone about to start college?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
Even these seemingly less radical changes could have massive ripple effects.
Look how.
Funding formulas.
Oh, yeah.
Curriculum decisions, how teachers are trained.
Why?
It could impact everything.
All right, so we've got this potential power shift brewing.
Big time.
But then there's this other issue that really fired up Trump's base.
Oh, yeah.
What he calls the quote-unquote culture wars in the classroom.
Oh, boy.
Critical race theory, gender ideology, mask mandates.
He loves hitting those.
Constantly on the campaign trail, it felt like.
Every other day.
Yeah, a new controversy.
This is where things get really tricky.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're dealing with issues where it's really hard to separate facts from political spin.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Take critical race theory.
Right.
It's this academic framework.
Yeah.
Mostly taught at the university level.
Okay.
But it's become this catch-all term for any discussion of race and inequality in schools.
Right, like it's this idea that schools are trying to, like, indoctrinate kids.
With this woke agenda.
Yeah. We've got to look at this incident map.
From Parents Defending Education.
Yeah, they claim it shows...
hundreds of cases.
Hundreds of cases of this happening.
And that's a perfect example of how charged this whole issue is. They see things like incorporating diverse authors into reading lists or acknowledging transgender students' identities.
As proof of indoctrination.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Michelle Exner.
Yeah, I know her.
One of their leaders.
Yeah.
She calls it a fight for a return to merit and meritocracy.
But on the other side, you've got groups like the ACLU who say, this is just a way to censor discussions.
In the class.
Yeah, and prevent students from learning about different perspectives.
It's really tough.
How do we even begin to untangle this?
The key is remembering that this isn't just a Trump-era issue.
It's been going on for a while.
This battle over what's taught in schools and who gets to decide, it's playing out in state legislatures all over the country.
Oh, absolutely.
Often along partisan lines.
Oh, for sure.
Look at the differences in sex education curricula.
Oh, gosh,
between red states and blue states. I mean, it's...
light and day.
Totally different worlds.
So even if some of Trump's more radical ideas don't actually happen.
Right.
This broader trend of education becoming a political battleground.
Oh, yeah.
That's not going away.
Not a chance.
And that has implications for everyone, right?
Huge implications.
Yeah, that you're a parent.
Worried about your kids.
Yeah, or just someone who cares about the future of the country.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got potential DOE shakeups.
Big ones.
These fiery culture wars. They're not going away.
And now let's add another layer. School choice.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Trump's a huge advocate for it.
Especially for vouchers?
Yeah, those voucher systems that would let parents use public funds for private schools or homeschooling.
It's all tied to that parental rights argument we were just talking about.
Makes sense.
The whole idea is that parents should have more control over their kids' education.
And that competition will lead to better outcomes.
For everyone, theoretically.
Proponents point to struggling public schools.
In certain areas.
Right. And they're like, look, parents need options.
They need choices.
This has got to be causing some major tension with the teachers' unions.
Oh, yeah.
What are they saying about all this?
The NEA, the biggest teachers' union.
Yeah.
They're arguing that these school choice programs, they divert much-needed funding away from public schools. And that they just make inequality worse.
They're worried about lack of accountability.
In private schools, And they worry that these voucher programs will just end up benefiting wealthier families.
At the expense of the kids who really need public education.
It sounds like a classic ideological clash.
It is.
Individual choice versus collective responsibility.
It's in a nutshell.
And it's playing out in these very concrete policy debates.
Exactly.
Have we seen any indication of how this might actually play out under a second Trump administration?
Well, we've seen mixed results with these recent school choice referendums.
Like what?
Voters in Nebraska actually rejected a voucher program.
Oh, wow.
Similar initiatives failed in Colorado and Kentucky.
Interesting.
But I wouldn't count Trump out just yet.
Why not?
He's got some really powerful allies in Congress.
Right, Like who?
Like Senator Cassidy.
Right, he's big on school choice.
He's pushing a bill for tax credits.
For what?
For private school donations.
Interesting.
And with Republicans potentially controlling the Senate, this could gain some serious momentum.
Okay, so a lot hinges on those congressional battles.
A lot, yeah.
But beyond this specific policy stuff, one thing that really struck me in all of this research was this quote from Christopher Marker.
From the Freedom Institute.
Yeah.
I know him.
He wasn't just talking about vouchers.
He's bigger than that.
He was talking about the need for a fundamental shift in how we think about the role of parents in education.
That's interesting.
Yeah, he's arguing that parents have been sidelined for too long.
Interesting.
And that a true education revolution requires putting them back in the driver's seat.
He sees school choice as just one piece of that puzzle.
It's interesting because even if you disagree with some of Trump's more specific proposals, this idea of parental empowerment really resonates with a lot of people.
It taps into this deep anxiety about schools becoming these monolithic institutions that are out of touch with parents' values.
Absolutely.
And that's why this whole debate is so complex and so emotionally charged. It's not just about money or curriculum. It's about fundamental questions of power, control. And what we want the future of education to look like.
It's a big one.
Huge. And that brings us to another battleground.
Oh, yeah?
Higher education. You know, Trump's never been shy about his opinions on what he sees as like liberal bias on college campuses. And he's made it clear he's coming for them.
This is where he starts talking about getting rid of those DEI programs, all that diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff.
Right. A lot of people see those programs as
essential.
Yeah, essential for making campuses more welcoming and inclusive.
But Trump.
He's painting them as like
discriminatory.
Yeah, discriminatory, harmful to academic freedom.
He's tapping into this idea that's gaining traction with a lot of conservatives.
Oh, yeah.
That universities have become too focused on social justice at the expense of like traditional academic rigor.
Interesting.
And he's got a pretty powerful weapon to use.
Oh, yeah. What's out?
Federal funding.
Ah.
So he could literally withhold money from schools that don't fall in line on DEI.
He could certainly threaten to. Now, whether he could legally pull it off.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
That's a different question.
Yeah.
You can bet groups like the ACLU would be all over that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But even the threats could be enough to force some universities to rethink things.
Okay, so it's a bold move.
Very bold.
It would have huge ramifications for campus culture.
Absolutely.
But let's talk about something else that could also have a big impact.
What's that?
International students.
Oh, right.
Trump's hinted at wanting to limit enrollment.
This is a complex issue with a lot of different angles.
Like what?
Well, part of it is economic.
Okay.
This idea that international students are taking spots away from American students.
Right.
Or that they're driving up tuition costs.
Okay.
But there's also this national security element, concerns about espionage.
Espionage.
Yeah.
Or intellectual property theft.
So it's a mix of that America First economics and, like, anxieties about foreign influence.
You got it.
It's worth noting, though, that this isn't just a Trump thing.
No, not at all.
Other countries have already implemented policies to limit international student enrollment.
Oh, yeah. Like who?
Canada, Australia.
Interesting.
But the potential impact on U.S. universities?
Yeah.
It would be huge.
Yeah, I mean, think about it.
I mean, international students bring in a lot of tuition revenue, don't they?
A lot for many universities.
Especially the smaller ones.
Yeah. Losing those students would be a major financial blow.
Wow.
Could lead to program cuts, faculty layoffs, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, so we've got these potential funding battles over DEI.
Right.
Limits on international students.
It's a lot.
Sounds like a recipe for chaos in higher education.
Yeah, it kind of does.
But there's another layer to all of this.
What's that?
That I don't think we can ignore.
Okay.
The accreditation process. Accreditation's like that good housekeeping seal of approval.
Exactly.
For colleges and universities.
It's how they prove they meet certain quality standards.
Right.
And you know what? Accrediting agencies could become another tool.
Another tool?
In Trump's arsenal.
Wait, so are you saying
that
accreditors could actually penalize schools that don't comply with his demands?
It's definitely possible.
Like on DEI or other issues?
Yeah, and if a school loses its accreditation,
yeah,
that's a death blow.
Whoa.
They lose access to federal funding.
Right.
Their degrees become worthless.
Wow.
It's game over.
It sounds like Trump's really aiming to, like, reshape higher education from the top down.
It does seem that way.
What are people within higher education saying about all of this?
I mean, there's a lot of anxiety.
I bet.
Uncertainty, to say the least.
Right.
Ted Mitchell, who heads the American Council on Education,
Right.
he called this a moment of inquietude for colleges and universities.
Inquietude, huh?
Yeah. He says there's a growing perception that higher education is leading American society in the wrong direction.
That's a pretty harsh statement. It feels like there's this widening gap between how some segments of society view higher education and what's actually happening on campuses.
It's a complicated issue.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be resolved overnight.
No.
There are strong feelings on all sides.
For sure.
And it's likely to be a major source of conflict throughout Trump's presidency.
Okay, so we've got all these potential changes to higher education, plus everything we talked about earlier with K-12, the dismantling of the DOE, the culture wars, school choice.
It's a lot.
It's a lot to digest.
It is. It's a lot to process, for sure.
And we're just scratching the surface here.
Yeah, we are.
It's still early days.
Very early.
But if Trump gets his way, the U.S. education system could look drastically different.
Oh, yeah.
In the next 4 years.
Absolutely. The big takeaway here is that education is becoming increasingly politicized. And these battles, they're not going away anytime soon.
No, I don't think so.
The real question is, what kind of education system do we want for future generations?
It feels like we're at a real turning point.
A pivotal moment, yeah.
And it's not just about these policy debates.
No.
It's about these fundamental questions.
Like what?
Of values, priorities, what kind of society we want to create.
It's a huge question.
A huge one. Yeah, it's a lot to think about, really is. There's so much we've covered in this deep dive.
Oh, yeah.
All this stuff about the Department of Education, the culture wars, school choice, and now higher ed, too.
It's a lot to wrap our heads around.
It really is. It's kind of overwhelming, to be honest.
I think it's easy to get lost in all the details of the policies and political battles, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
But I think it's important to step back.
And ask.
Yeah, what kind of education system do we actually want?
For our kids.
For our kids, for future generations.
That's the big question, right?
It is a big one.
And it's not something that politicians or experts can answer on their own.
No, absolutely not.
It requires, like, a bigger conversation.
A broader societal conversation.
About our values and priorities.
Exactly.
And that conversation needs to go beyond just sound bites and partisan talking points.
It needs to be grounded in, like, a real understanding of the challenges
facing our education system.
Right, and a willingness to listen to different perspectives.
You know, something that really stood out to me from our research was this quote from Ted Mitchell.
From the American Council on Education.
Yeah, he talked about this growing perception that higher education is, quote, leading American society in the wrong direction.
That's a pretty strong statement.
Yeah, pretty stark.
It highlights this disconnect.
Between
How some people view higher education and what's actually happening on campuses.
Right. There's this fear that that universities are too focused on
what?
On like so-called woke ideology.
Right. At the expense of traditional academic value.
But isn't it also about like access and affordability?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, the cost of college is insane.
It's skyrocketed.
Yeah, and student loan debt is crippling for a lot of people.
For so many.
And that's where some of that tension around school choice comes in.
I see what you mean.
For some families.
Especially those who are struggling financially or who feel like their public schools just aren't cutting it.
Yeah.
School choice represents a lifeline.
It's a way to access educational opportunities they couldn't otherwise afford.
You got it.
But as we said earlier, critics worry that school choice could just make inequality worse.
Right, and undermine public education.
It's a tough balancing act.
It is.
Finding ways to empower parents without sacrificing the quality and accessibility of public schools.
Absolutely. There are no easy answers.
No, not at all.
But I think we can all agree on one thing.
What's that?
This debate about the future of education, it's not going away.
No, it's here to stay.
And it's a debate that we all need to be engaged in.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you'd like our listeners to take away from all of this?
The most important thing to remember is the future of education isn't set in stone.
Oh.
It's something that we all have a role in shaping through our choices, our actions, our engagement.
So whether you're a parent,
a student, an educator,
or just a concerned citizen,
your voice matters.
Pay attention.
Stay informed.
Ask tough questions.
And don't be afraid to get involved.
The stakes are high.
They are.
But ultimately, the future of education is in our hands.
I think so.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everyone.
We hope it's given you some food for thought.
Absolutely.